Hello, welcome back to the Peak Endurance Podcast. Episode 179 is an episode where Ron and I chat with one of my good friends that I met while I lived in Canada, Lourdes. We recently caught up with her, or when I say recently, earlier in the year, and ran with her a couple of times on our trip when we went to Canada after Barclay. Lourdes is always doing an amazing race in some far-flung location, and recently she ran Tor Des Geants. Now, this is a race I really want to do. So I thought I would get her on the pod to chat about this amazing event, because I'm pretty sure once you hear about it, you'll want to do it too. As you will hear, she has had many ups and downs this year, running all over the world. The lucky thing. In fact, she messaged me after we recorded to say she forgot one race, the Blackfoot 50 miler in May. I was actually meant to do that race back in 2018, but had to go home to Australia as my mum had just had a stroke. Very difficult times. But anyway, keep that in mind that there was still another race when you hear her talk about all the races that she has done this year. And I'm not just talking little races, they're all big races. Lourdes is such a great person, so easygoing and chatty. Now, if you're listening with kids in the car, please be warned the F-bomb may or may not mean rock. Probably yes, it was. But I have done that occasionally, to be fair. It was part of the conversation, and to be honest, isn't that work just part of the conversation, no? And my interviews tend to be fun conversations with awesome people, so it will happen occasionally. I know I did the last pod, I just put it, so please forgive me, but yeah, I try really hard not to swear. Ron and I had so much fun chatting with Lourdes. She is hilarious, as you will find out. Do you love the pod? God, I hope so. If you do, did you know that it is super easy to go onto Apple Podcasts and give the show 5 stars if you think it deserves it, and I'm assuming because you're listening to it, you enjoy it, and write a short review. Now, I don't get paid to do this podcast. In fact, it actually costs me money, and let me tell you, a heck of a lot of time. But knowing that it means something to you makes me keep plugging away at it. The link to Apple Podcasts is in the show notes, or you can just look it up, and seriously, it doesn't take long. Due to popular demand, I am holding my goal-setting webinar again at the start of the year. Next year, obviously. If you want to get your goals sorted and streamlined for 2023, now is your chance. This webinar covers not only setting goals for the year, but for within your races and for the races themselves as well. We will also talk about how to develop the habits to help you achieve your goals. The webinar itself goes for 90 minutes to 2 hours. I like to be flexible, and it's interactive throughout the webinar with also question time available at the end. You will also be given workbooks and a recording of the event to go back to. All this for only $70. Go to the website peakendurancecoaching.com.au and head to the shop to register. Also, please, as I always say, don't forget to support my sponsors. Health, I always do that, don't I? I can't talk at some point. Health and high performance to keep those niggles at bay and get you back running healthy and strong if you have had the odd niggle or two. And the best chocolate out there, as it not only tastes good but is good for you, Peak Chocolate. Go to peakchocolate.com.au to get 15% off some yummy, yummy chocolate that is actually good for you. And these two companies support me to put out this podcast, so I'd really love if you could support them. And enjoy the chat that Ron and I have with Lourdes. I'm sure you will. Hello and welcome to the Peak Endurance Podcast, and welcome Lourdes.
Hello.
You sound so shy, which is totally not you.
I know.
So, Lourdes, for those people who don't know you, which is probably most people, because at the end of the day, you're a friend that I met in Canada. So maybe just tell people how you got into running, and then we'll sort of fast forward from there to explain why you're coming on the podcast. So how did you get into running and ultra running?
Okay. Well, I got into running when I was in college. I swam on the swim team at Virginia Tech. And when I decided to switch my major to architecture, because I knew I wasn't going to go to the Olympics for swimming, I stopped swimming. But part of our regimen for that was running.
Yeah.
And just to keep fit. And then, when you're used to, being in a pool for 4 hours a day, you're just used to moving. I'd always been physical. I'd swum for 12 years and, high school soccer and, well, no, not soccer in high school when I was a kid, and track, all the sports that kids do.
Yeah.
And then, then I just
I
kind
didn't
of,
do any sports. I did nothing.
oh, well, then I just kept running just for myself, my sanity,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm definitely, I definitely have an addictive and an OCD personality. And so it always just helped me kind of stay in check. And it's just something I found that I did for myself, I got up every morning and I went for a run, and it was nothing that anybody could take away from me, whether it be at school or later in my working years when other people decide to take credit for your things. It's something that I did it for myself, completely selfish.
And running is to a certain extent, but now also I met you in Canada, but you're American.
Yes.
But you've also lived in Australia, haven't you?
Yes. And that's actually where I started ultra running.
There you go.
Because I couldn't work, and we went there for only 6 months with my husband's work, and my kids were small and they were in school, and I didn't have anything to do all day, and I met some other runners, and they got me onto doing trails and eventually ultras, and then I just kind of kept doing that.
And where was that?
We lived in Newcastle. Yeah, about 2 hours north of Sydney.
Did you do any, for our listeners from Newcastle, did you do any of the runs or races around Newcastle?
I did. A long time ago. I know I did the Sydney while we lived there. I ended up living there 2 years, and I did the Sydney Marathon twice. I did 6-foot track.
Yep.
I did some of the smaller runs there's a couple 10K runs in Newcastle that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a Sri Chamoy event in New Zealand while I was there. And I ran the Great Wall of China while I was there.
So, can you run that? Is it physically?
Well, they have a marathon.
I
believe it was in May, but you have to go through a tour. And there was a group of, I think 4 or 5 of us friends, and we all went together.
Right.
Yeah. Now, the reason I got you on the podcast was because you seem to always be doing all these amazing races, really interesting races. And we'll get to some other ones too. But you sent me a message on what you've done this year. Excuse me, I have to put on my glasses because geez, can't read anything. And just this year you've done, I don't even know how to say it, the Tuscobia Winter Ultra.
Tuscobia.
I wasn't sure if the C was pronounced or not. The C&O Canal 100, the West Highland Way in Scotland, a relay of the Sinister, which was a race in Canada, the Palisades in Utah. You DNF'd it, but you still did it. What's WHW?
That's the West Highland Way.
Oh, that's the West Highland Way. Okay. Then you did Iron Legs, and then you've been to Tor Des Geants, and it's only bloody October. Sorry, we cut out there. And it's only October, and you've done that. So just talk us through. I mean, obviously, talk us through how this all happened.
Well, just this year?
Yeah, just this year. And then we'll talk about all the other crazy races you do.
Yeah. I don't have a history of being very lucky in lotteries. So, for example, this is my 10th year putting in for Hard Rock. I've never gotten
I saw your post about that because and I was talking to Ron about it because they don't have a lot of women that get in on the lottery, and you were like, come on, women,
Yes. Well, they changed the rules this past year or last year. And so now, instead of it just being a straight out lottery like it's been in the past, there's whatever percentage of women apply is the percentage that will start. Then what they do is if a woman can't, yes. So last year was the highest ever. And out of 145 runners, I believe 27 were women.
Right.
But normally it's like 10 to 15.
Yeah.
So, and right now there's like almost 400.
Yeah. But is it that women don't necessarily want to do that race, or is it like, what is it?
Well, I think for one, it's that, when I started applying 10 years ago, there was, or really more than that, because there might have been a year or two that I didn't have a qualifier. There was a very small list of qualifying races.
Yeah.
It was only maybe 10 to 15 at the most. So that has expanded. So more women qualify. Before, it's just people in general didn't qualify, men and women, just because it was a much smaller field that could get in. And with the expansion of it, and I just think, just like everything, the trajectory of ultra running in the past 12 years is skyrocketed. So I think maybe my first year at the most, there was a couple of hundred entrants for 140, and that's men and women. And now we're into thousands of people who have qualified. And so, I think the last couple of years, they keep switching up how the lottery works. And, then you always have the people who are elite who just get in.
Yes.
And there aren't a lot of spaces, right? And then you have the repeat people that come back. Or sort of like, I think after 5 years, you're sort of in another category. And, so like some of these people, I know people who've been doing it since you were able to just sign up. Like my first 100-miler, the Bear, in 2012, I signed up for it. And now it's a lottery.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We don't
have that yet in Australia.
No, it's not big enough in Australia where there's very few races that you actually have to.
Is there? I don't even know if there. Well, you've got to have a qualifier, but it's not a lottery. If you qualify,
I remember being in Australia, and I remember 6-foot track. Like you had to be on the computer and sign up, because that one would fill up even back in 2008.
Yeah. But there was still no lottery. Like it was just fast.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, you had to be quick. And I think that's the way the US ones were too. But now I think even that, because then the computers were crashing and nobody could get on. And so I think they just went to a lottery because it's just gotten, kind of all out of control, right? Yeah. So.
Yeah, well, I messaged the organisers because they said Barkley Marathons was a qualifier. And I was like, but he says you have to have done a fun run. And I said, but only 2 women in the history of the race have done a fun run. He's like, well, the rules are the rules.
So those 2 women feel free to enter.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I think that's probably got to be the hardest qualifier.
I know. I thought just getting into Barkley's hard enough, surely. But no.
Yes, that should be enough for sure.
Yeah,
especially for a woman.
Yeah. But anyway, such is life. Fingers crossed you get in.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. So anyway,
I don't know that my body feels that way, but
all right. So the first race of the year was the Winter Ultra. What's that one?
So Scobia is up in Wisconsin, and it's considered a winter ultra. So you pull a sled that has all of your survival gear in it. And it's on one of their established trails. They have a large snowmobile system in place, and it's called the Tuscobia Trail. And you basically go from one end to the other, pulling your sled. And there's very limited aid, maybe just a couple of aid stations. And so you're going quite a far distance. And so you have to have everything with you that, if there's a case of emergency or you need sleep, and they have everything with you.
So how heavy would your sled be?
That one is normally probably about 35 pounds. They can get up to, depending on the distance. I did the 80. If you're doing the 160, you might be closer to, 45 or 50, because you're carrying food and water, and if you don't want to have to stop to melt snow, which takes time.
Yep. Sorry, go on. We're just trying to figure out that wasn't what.
Oh, that's right. You guys are in kilos. Sorry. That's one thing. I've lived in metric countries now for a very long time, and I'm
Canada's metric too.
I have not picked it up.
It's one of those things that's really hard, I reckon.
Yeah, I can't do the Fahrenheit Celsius either. I'm still on Fahrenheit. I don't know what zero means.
Fahrenheit and Celsius. What was the temperature like in the winter ultra?
It can depend. I mean, I've done several, and I've had everything from almost 40 degrees Fahrenheit to 40 below zero.
Okay. Yeah.
So it all just depends. You actually want it to be colder. The sweet spot, and I know this, well, I know in Celsius, the sweet spot is about 10 below zero, because you want it to be cold enough that the snow sets.
Yeah.
So that you're not going through like a sloppy mess.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of clothes on, so you don't want to be so sweaty.
Yeah. 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 That would be the hard bit, is
but
the layering.
Yes. Yeah. It takes, I'm very lucky to live here and to be able to practice, and to literally some days just go out my door, out my garage, and through the neighborhood with my sled. There's a lot of people who can't do that, and
just to be clear,
I've always been very grateful that I live somewhere.
Yeah, just to be clear for all the listeners, you're in Calgary, Canada.
Yes.
Yeah, Canada. I don't think we actually.
Oh, I mean, I said Canada, but yes, Calgary. I mean, I did, and you commented on the interview that I did with Paul Watkins, who won the Arctic Ultra, and like where he obviously had to train in no snow.
Yeah.
So doing a tire course.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess you just had the neighbours looking at you like you were weird, though.
Yes.
They're going, I have had that crazy Lourdes again.
Where's your sled?
All right. So then
I've actually had.
Yep.
I've actually had somebody ask me if my baby was in there. I was like, no. Like a dead body? No, I'm not dragging the dead body.
Yeah, well, that would be a way of getting rid of the dead body, wouldn't it? I'm just going out training with my sled.
Yeah, that's right. Dump. Good way to lighten the sled too.
Yeah. Dead weight, literally.
That's right.
All right. So what was the C&O Canal?
So the C&O Canal is it's actually a 200-mile canal in Maryland. It borders Maryland, West Virginia, and Virginia. It used to be a canal where they had the boats, pulled by donkeys, before the trains came, right? Before there were trains, that's the way they would move things up and down the river along those three states. And so then the trains came and the canal became obsolete, because obviously the trains were a lot faster.
Yeah.
And but it's still there, and the canal system is still there. And so it's a historic system that people, they bicycle, they walk it, they hike it. It's actually, there's a section of it that's part of the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, okay.
That's very famous, that a lot of people hike. And we were just on one section of it, and I looked it up, and I wanted to run it mostly because it's close to home, to my parents' house.
Yeah.
And it was just a nice way to go home and to kind of get them. And I've been doing these for so many years, and, they don't really understand, but they want to be involved and they want to know more about them. And so I thought that was a way that they could come out and they see me. And it was a loop. So we did 3 loops. And so they were able to see me, a couple times. And so that was nice. They were actually able to kind of see what it was all about.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been nice. That's lovely.
Yeah. But it was really hard because it was really flat.
Yeah.
Sounds horrible. My feet were just destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, people underestimate how hard.
You had to run.
Yeah.
Well, and you had to actually run. That was terrible.
It is terrible. Who does that?
No, yeah. Yeah, that
Crazy
was pretty
talk.
brutal. But I
So
met some really
what
great
month was that
people.
in?
That was in the end of April.
Okay, so the winter ultra was January, then April
Yeah.
was, and that was a 100-miler along the canal. Yep.
Yeah.
And don't forget, in between that was the Green Monster with us.
Oh yeah, the Green Monster with us.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. That was training.
Yeah.
That was an awesome run. That was a brilliant run.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the West Highland Way. I remember seeing all your posts about that. What time of day? What time of year was that?
That's in June.
So
They run that in June.
summer.
Yeah, well, and not in
So I did
Scotland.
inverted
It's
commas.
still pretty chilly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful, like, I can't recommend that race enough. It's one that I had actually looked at for several years, like 10 years. I've been following the race for a long time, but the logistics of it are difficult in the sense that it's in Scotland. And when you go, it's mandatory to have a crew and a driver, and also mandatory to have a pacer. Now, for international runners, they pair you with locals, and they paired me with two women, which was fantastic. And because they both had knowledge of the trail, it's I think the oldest, or one of the oldest established ultra runs in Scotland. But the West Highland Trail is actually a trail that people hike.
Yes.
Like, they go like a through hike. So they do it for 3 or 4 days and they camp along.
So how long was the race?
The race it's 95. Well, 95. I think they moved the finish this year. So it was like 97 miles.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the established trail is like 95 miles, but we start a little bit like, or you begin in a town called Milngavie outside of Glasgow, and you basically run north to Fort William, which is in the Highlands.
Yes. Yep. And so the two women that you got paired with, one of them was your driver and one of them was your pacer.
No, both of them were pacers. My husband went as my driver.
Okay.
He had the car, and then he would meet, like, their aid stops were basically water. A couple of them maybe had a couple things, but like he had to be at they have to be at certain spots. They have to check in, and then they're required to basically feed you and everything.
I suppose that means then that the race organizers don't have to organize aid stations. As in food wise.
Yeah, I think the food, it was pretty minimal. Some of them had stuff, but for the most part, no, it's pretty much like you're supposed to be pretty self-supported.
Yeah. And what was that race like? What was it like then?
It was beautiful. It was beautiful. I mean, it was, you start in the south and you go all along Loch Lomond. Well, the first like 20 or so miles are actually very runnable, and the cutoffs are quite tight. And then, the further you go and the more you start hitting trails and stuff, it becomes a little bit more lenient with time. But I think maybe I came into the first one with like only 45 minutes. Like it's not really, you don't really start banking time till later on. And, like all Scotland weather, we got hit with gale force winds and massive storm. So, on the second half of the course, but I thoroughly enjoyed pretty much all of it, except for one section that was kind of like on a brick kind of sidewalk road, and that was just tore at my feet, but the fact that once we got into the north, you could see them in rows, and we were kind of running between them, which I really enjoyed after having done Dragons back in 2019, and we were going up and over everything. It was really nice to just go between. And the two women, Katie and Fiona, who paced me, are just like, they're friends for life. They were so sweet and so wonderful and so knowledgeable. Every now and again, I really didn't understand anything that they were saying to me, but it didn't really matter.
You just kept me
going, and that's all. Yeah, that's right. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah, well, because especially if they were from Glasgow, that's a very strong accent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they were great, and they both had so much knowledge. I think Fiona has climbed all of them in rows, all
Oh, wow.
282 of them in Scotland in her 30s. And Katie had done, there's two other races. One is called the Highland Fling, and
Yeah.
it's sort of the first half of the trail. And then there's the Devil's Staircase, which is kind of the second half. And she had done both of those races. And she's hoping to put it all together one day, but she hadn't quite done that yet. And so, but she, just having somebody know, because the course isn't marked per se by the race, but it's marked in the sense of, because it's an established trail, there's established trail markings. But those can be a little, there's quite a bit of people going off the course, from what I understand.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially because when you're doing these things, you're not always 100% with it, are you?
That's right. And especially in the very beginning, I was very happy. I was sort of like, I stuck myself in the middle of a group of Scottish runners, because we kind of going in and out of the trail and in through neighborhoods, and none of that was marked.
Oh, wow.
And so I was really happy to be with people who knew kind of where to go. So
makes it kind of easier. Then in I think it's July, you did Sinister. That's July, isn't it? Yeah. And leg 3. How long's leg 3? I can't remember.
Leg 3 is the one that they call Devil's Ball Sack or something. Because it's usually the heat of the day, but this year it was reversed. So we were actually at night. Like I started at like 10 o'clock.
What do you mean it was reversed? Did they reverse directions of the race?
They reversed the entire course.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So that was interesting. In the sense that, Brian decided not to change any of the signage. So you were going backwards, but like it was a bit confusing. Like you're thinking you're going to CP1, it was really CP3 and then CP2, and then so it, there were a couple, and I was in the dark. Like I know that leg really well, but in the dark it all looks the same, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's fun.
But it was fun. I had a great team, super fun. It was kind of one of those last minute things.
But that's often the best.
Not a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Okay, so then you went to the Palisades in Utah. What race is that?
So that's a race I should have done a little bit more research on before signing up for. In the history of the race, 2 women have finished it, or 4, I think, 4 now.
So how long is it?
It's 100 miles, and it's at elevation, which I found hard, and it was like 115 degrees, which was hard, and I was still exhausted from West Highland Way. So
when you say it was at elevation, because Calgary's at 1,000 meters. So what's
but we started at 5 something, and then we were going above 10. We stayed there like feet. And it was just that I had no trouble with the climbs. It was those just straight up, straight down, but those straight downs for me are hard. And I was just I got into trouble with, I think, being like a bit of almost heat either exhaustion or stroke. Like for example, I don't normally take gels very much. I think I took like 15 of them because I couldn't eat.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't poop one time.
Oh my God.
I mean, I know that sounds like weird, but like if you think about how you normally take a gel and then poop out a gel, it's kind of like what you do. So then to know I had 15 of the my bowels had just kind of like shut down. Like I think I was just I mean, I didn't go into it. I had actually asked them if I could please, because this was a deferral from 2020, and I'd asked them if I could please defer that I just gotten back from Europe and I was tired, and they were like, no. So I didn't want to lose my money. So I was like, okay. So I just went. And, I'm proud, 5 women started, 19 started the 100. Of the 5 were women. Only 2 of us got out of the 50-mile aid station.
Wow.
So that, and I actually timed out. I could have kept going, but I timed out at 80. And
what happened to the other woman?
She didn't make it out. She didn't make it in. She didn't make it in time.
Yeah. And so why do women find that race so hard, do you think? Because of the time factor?
I think the time factor, I mean, there were 2 guys still out on the course when they hit 36 hours, and he's like, well, they won't get a finish. Like, which I'm going to be honest, I think is, pretty shitty. Like if people, and it was 115 degrees, like, it's not like it was pristine, temperatures. I think if they did that in the fall, it would, I think if heat wasn't a factor, and it's, none of it, like, it's very exposed, you're not very protected at all. And there just aren't a lot of places to make up time because you're on this single track, and sometimes like the grass is up to here. And so even if you're like going downhill and you feel like you could run, you can't see. You can't see your feet. You can't see anything. Your poles are getting stuck. And, it just, there's a lot of things about it that I liked. I thought it was a beautiful course. But I'm going to be honest, like starting with 19, it's like I came into the very first aid station dead last. Like and I hadn't seen anybody in hours, and so, and, eventually, I think the heat caught up with a lot of people. I think maybe there were 5 finishers, to be honest. And I think, the heat caught up with a lot of people, went out too fast, and it just, the aid stations were pretty far. They weren't too far apart, but I don't know. I think those would do a loop one way and then loop back, so you kind of know what you're going to do, but you don't, because you don't really remember it when you're seeing it the other direction. But I don't know. It was just, that was, an experience. It is what it is. I got 80-mile training. I got an 80-mile training run in, and good elevation training.
Well, that's true.
I just felt, but it took me a long time. It took me a solid 2 weeks to recover from that. I mean, I felt awful from just, and it wasn't just mentally because I hadn't finished. Like physically, I was just destroyed. And so that's why I know it was definitely something physiological going on with me, because I just felt, it took me so long to recover.
All right. So then you did the Iron Legs, 60K. And you said to me you did that because you needed to, you needed something, a win for your head after the DNF.
Yes, I definitely, like, my confidence was kind of shot. And in the sense of like, crap, like I'm facing 200 miles and I can't get 100. Like, what am I going to do? And it did really kickstart me getting my ass back out to the mountains, which I needed because I really hadn't done it before Palisades, which was obviously a mistake. And, being out on the Iron Legs course, knowing the Iron Legs course, being.
Are we back?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's still recording. There we go. So sorry, you were saying, we dropped out again. You were out there on the Iron Legs course. Yep.
Yeah, and I just really wanted to enjoy the day. So I took the 60, and to tell you the truth, at the end of the day, I was like, whoa, when you do the 60, that's like really runnable. It ended up being tough, because you're like, oh, it's only 60. I need to be running. I need to be running. And then I thought, well, crap, I've been running like all day. So, but it was great. We had a beautiful day, and that's a great race. It's that's very well supported, and one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, that's out in Kananaskis.
Out of Station Flats, and so over Powder Face, and
just at past Prairie
and
all that area. Yeah, it's a good area. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I do a lot of my training. And so they're trails that I know really well and I'm comfortable. I know the course. I know what direction to go. I knew I wasn't going to get lost or anything. And it's just great. It's always fun to be out there and see everybody.
Yes.
You know so many people, and that's
Yeah.
really fun.
Yeah, yeah. And was Leo there at one of the aid stations with his fireball?
Oh yes. Yes.
Good to hear. Did you have a shot?
No, I did not have a shot.
I don't know.
No, after the last race where my bowel stopped working, I thought best to just I'll keep the shots for after.
Yes, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so then ultimately that was like you said, it was training for and you said a 200 miler. And of course that 200 miler was not just any 200 miler, but the Tor Des Geants. So hi, what's the lottery like for that one?
Well, I'd always heard that it was like really hard that you put your name in and then you wait quite a few years, and that's what I expected. So I put my name in, and then I think my name was pulled first because it was the first one on the list.
That's awesome.
So I went upstairs and I was like, "Guess what? We're going to Europe twice this year."
Oh well, so not such a bad thing.
Yeah, no, it turned out to be not such a bad thing.
So talk us through how that race went.
Well, aside from being terrified,
so why
200, well, I just this format I had covered 200 miles at Dragon's Back in 2019, but that is a staged race, right? So it's you're running from I think 6 a.m. till 11 o'clock at night, and then you have a forced stop, right? As long as you make the time. This one, you have 150 hours to cover the complete course. They describe it as 330 kilometers with 31,000 meters of gain.
Yeah.
So, the reality is that it's 357 kilometers and a little bit more gain. But I mean, it doesn't, really at that point, it doesn't matter. But you have 150 hours from when you start. The clock starts ticking and it doesn't stop, and you have 150 hours to do the course. Again, it's a course that's an established course. It goes on the Route 1 from you begin in Courmayeur, in Italy, and this is the Aosta Valley, and you have a little handy dandy map. So you begin over here, and you actually travel south, and you go around, and then you on the 2, and then you come back up along the Route 1. So at around halfway, you switch over from route, but it's literally an established, sort of like the Trail de Mont Blanc. It's an established trail that people hike, all the time. And I mean, I can't say enough good things about it. It was literally everything that I wanted it to be. And I feel like I did everything I could to have the best experience out there that I could. And that was fantastic. The only little blip was that Mother Nature decided to dump almost a foot of snow over the last col, and so the race was stopped.
Yeah.
So if you didn't make it,
how far in was that?
I was 332 kilometers at that point.
Oh no!
So over 200. Yeah. We literally had 1 kilometer climb to the col, and then run back down into town, like 19 kilometers back down. So that's a bit. At the time, I understood why they stopped it, and they made the right decision, especially in lieu of things that have happened in China and in some of these other ultras where people have been exposed and they've lost people, just because, like, nobody, everybody went there to finish, but nobody went there to die,
Yeah.
And they had a set of professional mountaineers go up to the cold check because they were hoping at first they suspended the race, and they had a couple of mountaineers go up to check the conditions. The problem is that if you look at the mountain was coming, the storm was on this side. We were on this side. And we already had, I'd say, almost half a foot of snow. We climbed up to the last refugio in whiteout conditions. And when we got up there, the ice, this is what once you climb up to that col, the descent, the first 300 meters of that is the steepest of the entire race. And it's roped and everything. But what had happened was the storm had, dropped rain and ice and then snow on top of it. So the ropes were covered, the flags were covered. Okay. There's sort of these like metal steps built into the mountain to help you navigate down.
Yeah.
And all of that was covered. So they sent some mountaineers up, and they had told us that the mountaineers would come down. They'd get groups of us and take us up and over the col and then let us run to town. But apparently when the mountaineers came back, they said their report was that without crampons, ropes, and ice picks, we wouldn't be able to get down. Wow. I was just like, yeah. I was like, well, yeah.
Yeah, geez.
Like,
but
so that was a bit.
Yeah, but still it would have been disappointing.
Well, I mean, what they did was they put us on, basically we backtracked the trail that we had taken up. They backtracked us half of the way and then put us onto sort of like a service road back down to town. And then they picked us up in buses and then they drove us back to Cormier. But, they were very generous and still considering us finishers, because had you made it to this checkpoint and to the checkpoint before ours, before the cutoff, then you were considered, because you would have had, like, I got to that last refuge and I had 13 hours to do 20 kilometers.
Yeah.
So,
and you'd already done the advertised distance as well, hadn't you?
Yes, that's right. That's exactly what I thought. I was like, anybody have a watch? How far have we made it?
Yeah.
And I do believe actually that's why, like, I've gotten very lucky that Hard Rock accepted it as a qualifier, because they said you've made it over 200 miles. And since they have all of Candace's 200 miles that are, less than half the elevation, they went ahead and accepted it, which was, I think, generous. Like, they didn't have to do that. And,
So at Tor Des Geants, how much did you sleep very often?
Well, I tried. I knew I wasn't going to sleep before the 100-kilometer mark.
Yeah.
Because, I'm just too used to going at least 36 to 40 hours without sleeping. So I didn't even try. And then when I first did try, I have to say, like, they really do have, their life bases are well set up, more than enough cots. The only thing is that it's very hot. Like, you're out and you're in the cold, and then you get into these things and they're like extremely hot. So for menopausal women, it's not great. That's like, I asked, they did not have fans. And you just have so many people and the snoring and them. So I had been told, luckily, a friend of mine, Nikki Wren, I don't know if you know her.
I know her.
Yeah. So she's done the tour 3 times.
Oh, wow.
And she really, like a mentor, she really took me under her wing. And not only did she help me prepare physically, going out on trails, watching the way I climbed, watching the way I descended, giving me hints like, do this, do that, just to move better, to be more efficient. She really helped me prepare mentally for what it was going to be. And I can't even thank her enough, because I just, so many times when I was out there, I thought, I didn't, she would tell me things and I was like, okay. And I even made a list. I sent this to her, TDG tips from Nikki.
I like it.
And I had,
you're going to have to send me a copy.
Yes, and I really, and some of just you know, you don't believe until you're out there. Like she said, after the third, I was like, oh, I'm going to be so sore and I'm going to be so tired. And she's like, you know what? After 3 days, everything stops hurting. Nothing hurts anymore. And you just keep going. Your body just gets used to it. Your body stops sending the brain signals that you're hurting because even though it's been doing that for 2 days, you keep moving. Yeah. And she was right. Like on the third day, I'm like, I was like, oh, she told me that, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about the time. People look at this as a hiking holiday through Italy. And I'm like, well, that's easy for you to say. Like, you're fast. Like, my hiking, like my running is her hiking, right? So, but she was right. Like, it really was like you were out there and it was definitely more, I'm going to say, more relaxed in the sense of I didn't feel an urgency as far as time wise. I would check, but I was always at least several hours, sometimes 10 hours, sometimes 8 hours, sometimes 6 hours, sometimes 12 hours ahead of cutoffs. So I didn't have any worry about that. The issue was just putting one foot in front of the other. And really, my mantra the entire time was move, eat, move, eat, move, eat, sleep, repeat. And I just kept doing that. Move, eat, move. Like I kept eating, I kept drinking. There are 6 life bases along the course. About every 50 kilometers, there's what they call a life base. And you have a bag. It's like a duffel bag that they give you, and you can fill it. And that bag goes with you. So when you get to a life base, it's there. Then you leave and they transport it to the next one.
Wow.
So, but you're limited to what's in that bag. But you can have a race assistant, and that person can bring you things, bring you food, because I liked the food that they had. Basically, it was all very basic: pasta, fruits like dried fruit, apricots, prunes, cheese, bread, very basic things, but always the exact same, basically. So every now and again, it was kind of nice. Like Lee brought me a pizza. And not only was it nice for me to eat something different, then I also could share it with other people. So that was really nice. And I did have a little bit of an issue with the life bases weren't really allowing the assistants to come in to the life base. So you had to kind of go in, get your stuff, go back out, do stuff, go back in, get food, come back out, So that was a little bit of a mosh pit. It didn't used to be like that before COVID.
Okay.
So yeah. But in that sense, the race is one of the things I think I found very different about this race than other ones is that there aren't any major sponsors. It is really put on by the Aosta Valley and the peoples of the Aosta Valley.
Yeah.
So you really felt that it is a huge race in the sense that there's 1,000 runners. We started in 2 different heats. One went off at 10, one went off at noon. So that helped spread it out a bit. But like when you came into a life base, or there's also small aid stations between, or refugios. If you were up in the mountains, there were refugios. If you were down in the towns, in the valleys, there would be small aid stations at somebody's farm, or in the middle of the street, or like at the, like, say in town at, like, in the convention center or something, right? And you really felt like the people were, they bent over backwards for you. And the cheering, and you couldn't go 5 feet without somebody saying, oh, brava, brava, especially when they saw that you were a woman. They were just like, oh my gosh, they were so supportive and so wonderful. And like, it almost felt like in some of the small towns, people were just bringing stuff from out of their house, like, like sandwiches and stuff. And
that's awesome.
It was really, and that, I think that is really what I went for. I mean, obviously the views and the physical challenge of it. Yes, I went for that as well. But everything, I have followed this race again, probably I'd say at least 8 years.
Yeah.
And everything about it to me was, it reminded me of what races were like 10 years ago, 12 years ago when I started, right?
See, and they're the races I like.
Yeah, and this is obviously on a larger scale, right?
Yeah,
but it's still, it's not the juggernaut, I don't think, that UTMB has become.
Yes.
Right? Or Western States or Hard Rock even. It hasn't become that type of juggernaut. There's still a lot of people who've never heard of it.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, mostly run by people who are European. You don't have, I mean, yes, you have some good runners in there, but like Killian's never done it. Courtney's never done it. A lot of the sponsored athletes have never done it. And I assume it's because it's not sponsored, right? So they're, I mean, I don't know, but that's what I assume, right?
Yeah.
Because they, you know, they could obviously go out there and crush the course. Yeah. So, but I mean, I mean, I could just go on and on for days. Like,
so what were the climbs like? Because they're pretty bloody long, aren't they?
They are really long and really hard. I have never climbed so slow in my life. I mean, I really, a little, like, after the site, I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, I can't, I was like, like, it felt like I couldn't even, and the elevation, it's not that high. I mean, it gets up to like 11,000, but I've done races at 11,000. So I was like, what is, you know, I don't know if it's just the way they come at you, or, you know, maybe it's a bit of the jet lag and all of that too. And the stress that, you know, you have 6 days and you're at day 2 and you can't breathe, you know, like, oh God, I've got 6 more days of this. So yeah, that, I mean, I think day 2 really was like a slap in the face. Just like, I don't, like, I'm never, ever, ever doing this again. Like, this is so hard.
Well, and the standard ultra runners refrain.
Right. And yeah, but then you meet this guy who's like 75. He's like, yeah, this is my 10th time. And you're like, what? You know? And then he's just like, and I'm like, and you're like, why can't I catch up to him? He is like 80. You know? And it was like, I mean, it was really like the climbs, it's not a joke when they say that you climb for 3 to 5 hours.
Oh my God.
Like there's 150-kilometer section. I believe it's after the 3rd life base, which is called Donnis. Between Donnis and Gressony is 57 kilometers, and it's an average of 24 hours to do that.
Oh my God.
So yeah. So it's, and I knew, you know, thanks to Nikki, I knew that. And so I was keeping in perspective, but it really helped a lot that I met some great people along the way that I spent time with. And that was wonderful. It's always great to get out of your own head and meet other people. You know, some of them had, you know, just a ton of knowledge about the course. Sometimes too much knowledge. Like, I don't like to know too much, but it helps, you know, just to hear, to know. And thank goodness Gressony is the next life, the 4th life base. And they said the race gets easier after that. So just hearing that, like, oh, it's going to get easier. It's going to get easier. Yeah. And even though it doesn't really feel easier, you think to yourself, oh yeah, this feels easier. Like, it's really better. Like,
it's like the placebo effect. You can convince yourself.
Yeah, I think so. And then I was like, oh yeah, this is why people, you know, come back, because this part's really nice. You know? Yeah.
And am I correct in believing that sometimes the downhills weren't that much of a reprieve anyway?
Well, the problem with the downhills is just like the ups go on forever, so do the downs. So yeah, you know, the first hour of downhill is great, but 4 hours into a downhill, you're like, oh, somebody kill me. It's funny because I didn't hallucinate. You know, I did sleep quite, you know, once I got the hang of the sleeping, I feel like I got the hang of it quite well. So I only had 2 big hallucinations, but one of them was on the long downhills. I would hallucinate that over the corner I would see a bridge, and I was like, oh, there's a bridge that must just lead us out off of this trail. But then it'd be like another 50,000 switchbacks, and God. Like that, and you kept looking, and I'd see a bridge. That's the way out. That's the way out. And 2 hours later, I was still going downhill.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they can be technical. It's, technical, rocky. There
Yeah.
were some places I find myself very surprised that I was actually passing some people on the downhill. So some of the, it's like anything, right? You have your lows and you have your highs, and you just have to kind of get through the low to get to that high. And it just kind of depending on my biggest issue with the downhills was later in the race. They were so long, my stomach was kind of turning.
Oh yeah.
Like just because you don't tend to eat as much going downhill.
Yeah.
And so I think because you just kept thinking, oh, I'm almost there. I'm almost there.
Yeah.
I'm almost there. You just had to remind yourself, no, you got like 4 hours of downhill left to go.
And you'd have to be so careful of not blowing out your quads on those downhills, wouldn't you?
Yes. But I mean, I go downhill so slowly that, that wasn't really an issue. The biggest issue I had was that I took a bad fall about 15 miles into the race.
Oh no.
And it created a hematoma on my right butt cheek, which literally looked like, it looked like a baseball sticking out of my, it was awful. I can send you pictures if you'd like.
Please do. I'll share them.
No, you do not want to share it. That's how I met this one girl, is Claudine. I went up to her and I was like, excuse me, but do you mind touching this? Does this look okay? And she looked at me, she's like, oh, I don't need to touch that, but that does not look okay. I was like, okay, thanks.
That's amazing. Where else in life would you be showing someone else your ass?
I know. But, and to be honest, like to this, like it's still tender.
Oh,
but,
wow.
And then I took another fall, which I think broke my finger.
Yes, it does look weird.
Yeah. Well, it was definitely contorted and not right. And when I looked at it, I just went like this and I was like, and I yanked it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I still can't bend it. So that's not great.
No. But I noticed you haven't been to the doctor about it.
No, I have. I have been to the doctor about it. Yeah. In fact, I'm going to go see an orthopedic next week. I'm hoping that they don't tell me that they have to re-break it at this point. But there's like a definite dent in my knuckle, and it's, it doesn't feel right.
Is it necessary to bend it? Like, what do you need it for?
Well, when I shake people's hands, it's kind of excruciating.
Fair enough.
And like opening things.
Yeah.
Luckily, I'm left-handed, so it hasn't been that big of a deal.
Yeah, but that's a fair point.
I wasn't. Yeah, when that probably happened. I think I was on the section before the last life base, so it would have been in the last maybe 70 kilometers.
So nearly at the end.
Yeah.
You were nearly there.
I was almost there.
That's right.
Stupid Mother Nature. And snow of all things.
I know.
I love snow. I do winter ultras, and for to have it be snow, that stopped me.
So not fair. Do you think you'll ever go back?
Well, I would say no, but then every now and again I say, oh, I need to go back because I didn't really finish.
Yeah.
And because I really did love it. Like if I had to do another 100-miler, there isn't another 100-miler that I look on a calendar and I say, oh, that's a 100-miler that I want to do. There's no other one that I want to do. Yeah. So, it would be different. I feel like I've learned a lot from the first experience. And I probably shouldn't share this, but I'm not a Garmin person. I'm not a tech person, which pisses everybody off. So what I did was I got a Garmin and I said to myself that, it would just seem like such a big chunk. Like I didn't want to look down at my watch and see 130 miles and be like, oh, I still got 70 to go. What I do at every life base, I saw a watch. Yeah. So at any point, I only ever had 50 some odd K to go.
Okay.
Right. I kind of tricked myself into like, okay, 50K done. And I'd stop it. And then I would have 2 hours, say at a life base, then I'd start it again, go.
Yeah.
Right. So I get back and, my total time for the distance I made was 137 hours, according to the race.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, that's not too well. I said, let me look up what my moving time is, figuring my moving time is probably going to be, because remember the 2 hours at each life base, give or take, aren't counted. So that's 12, say 14 hours that aren't accounted for. So I was like, well, so my moving time is probably going to be like 100 hours or something. It was 65 hours. So 65. I don't know. I was like, what the fuck was I doing?
No, but that's because really, it thought when you were going so slowly up the hill that you weren't moving.
That's what Nikki said. I'm like, well, that's even worse. I was moving and it didn't know I was moving. I don't know.
That just means
worse.
You have to do it again.
This is why. Well, but I was like, this is why I don't like technology. I was like, in my head, I was moving and I was so strong and I kept going. And then I look at it and apparently I was just sitting around picking my nose. I was like, I don't even have pictures. I was like, I know I was moving. Why doesn't this, show me move? So that was a bit, that was a bit of a slap in the face. 65 hours. What?
That's like half the time.
Not even. That's like less than that.
Oh my God.
Again, that's not counting the 14 hours that I was in life bases.
Of course.
So it makes it even worse.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's just terrible. I mean, the whole thing. I know. And then I think to myself, I missed, going over that coal by a couple of hours because of the storm. If I had just been moving earlier, but
what a could
I know. And that's what I tell myself. And the fact that I got to say, I think my proudest moments was at the very last life base before, not life base, but the very last checkpoint, St. Remy, before heading up to the last refugio. I looked around kind of at the carnage. Like I had slept 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And then I called my husband because I realized the temperature dropped like 20 degrees. And I was like, please bring me my puffy coat and my pants. I think we're going to head up. It's raining here. We have a 5-mile climb. I think I'm going to need my puffy coat. And well, my husband got lost and didn't show up. So I wasted 2 more hours waiting for him. His fault. No. And then, but in that time when I was sitting there, I made sure like I had slept 2.5 hours. I was eating, I was drinking. I felt really good. And I knew we had like less than 30K to go for the whole thing. So I figured I'm going to get to this next one. I'm going to push over the cold and I'm going into town. If I, need an hour nap on the trail or something, I'll just do that. But I knew I didn't have to sleep and I felt great. But the carnage that I saw around me at that aid station, people not sleeping, people not eating, people fighting with their crews, you saw the sort of the week-long deprivation, right, of people, and the people who, obviously the people who really weren't sleeping except were ahead of us, because they were moving faster. But that, I think, it like in that moment, I remember sitting there and thinking to myself, knowing how many hours I still had left and how far I had to go, and that, not knowing, at that point they weren't telling us that there was snow up there, because that I felt like I was like, even though it's taken me a long time to do this, I feel like I've done it well. I've executed it well in the sense of that I did it within myself. I did it within, like, I didn't feel like I was completely stressed out or anything. And I recovered very quickly afterwards. Yes. So, obviously you feel tired and you're hungry for like a week or so, but just because of the sleep deprivation. But I really felt like the way I ended up handling the sleep situation once I was able to sleep was really good for me. it worked well for me. Like when I needed sleep, I stopped and I slept, and I did the 2 hours of sleep. I had watched, I don't know if you've ever looked up Tor Des Geants on YouTube, but
Yeah, I've been watching heaps
are,
of it. Yeah.
oh yeah, the videos and videos and videos. I watched so many of them when I was training here at home, like on my treadmill,
Yeah.
that there were moments when I was out on that trail and it was like deja vu.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was like the sleep deprivation or, type it, I'd be like, I know I've been here. And I'm looking around and I was like, I've done this. I know I've done this. And I'm like, you've never been here. Like, what are you saying? It was crazy. Like, I really felt like, oh yeah, I remember this. I remember that. And I was like, no, you don't remember that. You've never been here. So I don't know if it was like my mind sort of replaying the videos that I'd seen over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was the one thing that's never happened to me at a race before, ever.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is. I mean, and the things you hallucinate though are always quite fun, but So what's next for you? So you've put in for Hard Rock. Have you got any plans for before then?
I have Arrowhead 135 at the end of January, which is another winter ultra. And no, pretty much. I mean, I'm still toying with going back to tour. I was like, Lee, can't we just move to Europe for like a year? It'd be so easy if I lived there already.
Come on, it's not that far for you even.
I know. I have pre-registered for UTMB because, again, I was in it for 2020 and we were able to defer to 2023. And so the only problem is West Highland Way gave me points, and I assumed that TDG gave me points. So I was kind of upset, really, I didn't finish because then I wouldn't get points. But apparently it never gave points.
How could that not? Part of it's on the same.
I know. I think it's like I said, I think it's because the organizations, right? Or this was even before Ironman bought it. So, I mean, unless I can throw in something that has points before, and now it's become so complicated with UTMB and the stones and the
stones. Like what the hell? Honestly, it's ridiculous.
I don't need. And then now you have to do their race series.
Yes, yeah.
Because races that used to give you UTM points, like I think Iron Legs used to give them to you. I don't think that they do anymore.
Yeah.
So, I, for all those years that I was qualified and I had the points for it, I don't know that I do, but I just threw in my pre-registration. I think that if you don't actually have the points, they just throw you out anyway.
Yeah.
But I sort of feel like at this point, if worse comes to worse and I don't get into UTMB, I can just kind of go and do it myself if I feel like, maybe find some people, Fanny, Kara, you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I reckon it would be an awesome.
Go over there. Yeah.
Awesome.
Have a holiday.
Fast packing, Yeah.
Yeah. The year that Fanny did it, she ran it, and then Leslie and some other girls went over, I think like a week or two later, and they fast packed it.
Yeah.
And Fanny's like, I spent mostly 2 nights on the course, and they did the whole thing in maybe a day extra, but they did it all in the daylight.
Yes, where you get to see it.
It almost makes more sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know what you feel, but when you're racing, you're not often looking at the beautiful vistas and all that sort of stuff because you're focused on cutoffs and finishing and doing this and that. Whereas when you do it as a holiday, you're more likely to enjoy it anyway.
Well, yes, but I think you race more than I do. You race.
Well, I used to.
I take pictures. I eat a sandwich. Obviously, I don't move a whole lot.
So. You're just sitting there picking your nose. That's right.
Yeah, I'm just sitting there. Yeah. And apparently not even looking around. I don't know what I'm doing. So I do think that, the issue with that, of course, is actually finding the people that are actually going to show up and do it, and really enjoy it. And, but I do feel like, I do know a good group of people. And if people are willing to do something like that, then I think, that's I think that especially I think after having the experience of tour, which was kind of like that, like you're kind of self-sufficient there for quite a while. I do feel like pretty much all the people that I know have enough experience that they could do that and just go out there and just really, enjoy, go out there and enjoy it in like, 4 days and, really see it.
Yeah. I mean, that's something, because I don't think I've done CCC, but I don't think I would bother entering UTMB as much as I want to do Tor Des Geants. But Ron and I have discussed just doing the trail anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Spending a couple of days doing it sounds, I'm not a 100-mile type person. So for me, that's much more attractive doing it over a couple of days.
Yeah. But and I think tour would be perfect for somebody like you because really your average, like my watch basically told me I averaged about 50K a day. I know I did more than that, especially in the beginning, but like I said, when a race gives you the time to do that, when you have the time that okay, I'm going to be able to do 30K, get 2 hours of solid sleep, and then do another 30K, 2 hours of solid sleep. And then it averages out to about 50K a day, right? Like you don't feel like you're doing 50K a day, but that's really what you're covering between the stopping and whatever you're doing. So it really, I do think it lends itself more to somebody who's going out really for kind of like a hiking holiday, right? But part of it is because of that elevation. 31,000 meters is a lot.
That's a lot.
And this is where I don't look at details very much. I saw 200 miles and I saw 150 hours. And I was like, well, that's pretty generous. I didn't realize.
No one told you were going to have to do the equivalent of Mount Everest 4 times.
Right. Yeah. But then for me, I think that's kind of a great equalizer because you're right in the sense that the people who think that they're great downhill runners end up either, really crashing their quads on the first couple downhills when they don't realize that they're going to be, 5 miles, so long, or it becomes so technical that you really just can't run that way. And especially when you're tired, the best thing there is, kind of that relentless forward motion, as long as you and eating, staying on top of the eating and the drinking is super important. And I think there, because it's all real food, it's no bars or candy or any of that. It's real food.
Yeah.
And that, it really does. I think it helps. It makes a big difference because you're fueling your body to do what your body's going to do, which is that long sort of extended low cardio, pushing. Like I think it really is more about strength there than necessarily like running. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which I prefer.
Yes, I know you.
Stuff this running stuff. That's too much hard work.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even fathom. I think Sabrina broke the record this year, the first female finisher, and the man, I can't even fathom how fast they're running that. Now, granted, they're not sleeping at all, but still, like, I just can't even imagine.
No.
And to be honest, it just isn't like where my heart is or what I want to do. Like, I want to challenge my body in the way that I think it can move at its best, right? And that's why I think something like this was better for me, because it was difficult, but it was something that I thought I had the experience that I could do, or I hoped. Plus, it is beautiful. And most of the races, whether it's the ones from this year or the ones from the last 15 years that I've been doing ultra running, most of them I've joined because I saw pictures and I was like, I want to be there, or I heard about the community. And like 6 Foot Track was like that for me when I was in Australia. I met some of the people, Jane And I just love them so much. And I was like, I want to be around these people. I'm like, what is this 6 foot? And when I got out to 6 foot track, I had been running in Newcastle, which is flat.
Yeah.
And I was just like, we'd never been to the Blue Mountains, right? Yes. And we'd never been out there. And I was just like, what are all these rocks? And I can't even run on this stuff. But I just love the people so much. Yes. And I like the community of it, right? And that's, I think, what I search for when I look at different races that I do. It's more about the community that I'm going to be spending the couple days, because you know that you're going to be sort of just immersed in that world, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. All righty. Well, thank you so much, Lourdes, for coming on the podcast. We'll have to do another one to find out, because we've actually been on for a while, find out about the other races you've done, because I'd love to know more about the Dragon's Back and all that sort of stuff too. Not that I want to do that one. That one's a bit too scary for me.
Yeah. And I did it. I got lucked out, and I did it before they made it 6 days. 5 days was enough.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd want to go back to D6, but I have to be honest. I'm very tempted. I have looked quite a bit at Cape Wrath, which is the sister race.
That's right. Yeah.
That's in Scotland. But every year I kind of follow it. Last year was just like, the weather was just awful. Like the entire time, it was
which makes it.
And we've seen videos of it where they're running through ankle deep bog, and it just doesn't look like fun at all.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
it might be lovely.
And I do.
Scotland's lovely, but that doesn't.
Yeah, it isn't. There is. I think it's in Scotland. Or I don't know if it's Scotland or England. It's called the Lakeland 3.
I've heard of that one.
The Lakeland district or something. It's like a 3-day, which I think would be it. And a lot of people do that in training for it, because it's 3 days. You know, it's kind of a nice way to get into stage. You know, well, it's short, but it's a good way to introduce yourself to stage racing, because it is very different. You know, we're so used to going till you kind of collapse, right? Yeah. Whereas here you're like forced to stop, and then all of a sudden you're like sleep, and you're like, well, what do you mean? I got like 24 more hours of being awake. And then all of a sudden at 6 a.m. you have to go, and you've probably fallen asleep at 4. Yeah. And so it's a very different dynamic. I would like to try to do more of it. You know, in the US and here in Canada, there's just not very much of it, right?
Yeah, not much,
you know, quite
honest. Yeah.
All
righty. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us. And we will speak to you again, no doubt. All right, hang on the line, and we'll say goodbye. Okay, bye.
Okay.